Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live, sponsored by CG Professional. Now, today on the show, CG Professional is our guest, and joining me now is founder and managing partner Stacey Turner. Hello, Stacey.
Hi, James.
Hello, lovely to have you on. Now, just a quick intro. CG Professional is a leading commercial law firm founded back in 2017 by Stacey and her colleague Louise Myers, and has become a regular contributor to Car Dealer Live when we discuss legal issues. And that's what we're going to be discussing today, some of the big issues dealers are facing at the present moment. Okay, right, Stacey, let's kick things off, really. We're in February, there's sort of light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully. Does it feel like there's a bit of, well, it feels like it's lockdown's sort of taking forever, really. I mean, what are the big issues that you're seeing at the moment?
I think at the present time, what we're seeing from our clients is just a lot of dispute, really, James. And that's across the board, whether that be from customers, raising issues, claims, litigation, ombudsman complaints, right through to employee issues, which are significantly increasing. And I think it's just a sign of the times, and we saw it back in 2008-9 with the recession. Then, in times of economic trouble, concern, you just see a rise in litigation. And whether that's people sort of, it's desperation, or whether people just have more time on their hands because they're perhaps furloughed and at home. So you're getting customers who are becoming keyboard warriors and are enjoying the process of, raising lots of incessant complaints. I'm not sure, but the trend is that litigation, sort of the court system, the tribunal system, we're seeing a huge spike. So not good, unfortunately, from a legal perspective, not good at the moment.
So has that been a trend throughout 2020, really, or has it got worse with every sort of successive lockdown?
Definitely got worse.
It's got worse.
Definitely got worse. And I think what we saw at the beginning, James, sort of March, April 2020, was there was just, generally speaking, I think in society, there was just more of a collective feeling, wasn't there? We're all in it together. The furlough scheme was seen as really positive. The government was being sort of shown in a better light, and sort of generally that feeling, was generally calmer. As time has transpired, and I think we saw it initially in November, when we saw the lockdown in November. That's when we here at CG, we started to feel that animosity, and that litigation sort of culture, unfortunately. So I think it's definitely getting worse, and I think it will remain for a little while, even when lockdown's lifted, because I think these issues don't sort of go away overnight. No. So I think, unfortunately, perhaps for the rest of this year there'll be a little bit more of it, and then hopefully we'll level out and settle down, sort of coming into the end of this year, beginning of next year.
Yeah, I think with all of this, there's just a little bit of lockdown fatigue, isn't there? I think, like you said, the first lockdown, everybody was like, we're all in this together. The second lockdown, still a little bit like that, but now everyone's sick to the back teeth of it, aren't they?
Oh God, including me, James. Absolutely, I'm fed up. Yeah.
Now, this is an issue that's been hot for every single lockdown, but I think particularly so in lockdown 3. It's about test drives. And what dealers can do and what they can't do. Surely everybody knows the rules now, and there's no confusion about what's allowed and what's forbidden. Have you been seeing anything different?
I think there's been a lot of frustration. I think there's been a lot of frustration, and I speak to my clients, and it has been dragging on now, and we're sort of in a period of time where traditionally sort of car sales would be strong. We're in a positive time of year for dealers, so I think there is that frustration. I am feeling a little bit more tension about the whole, well, surely we can be doing test drives if we can be doing deliveries. What's the difference? What's the difference in dropping a car off at someone's home for them to drive it round as a test than dropping a vehicle off as a delivery? And I get that, I understand it, but my view is that the rules are clear. It's not permitted. The government have come out and said that dealers must close. They mustn't be conducting any business except for responding to orders received. And a test drive isn't an order, is it? A test drive is exactly what it says on the tin, and that's someone thinking about and trialling the purchase of a car. So unfortunately, I can't be giving sort of, positive news on that. I've seen in recent weeks actually an increase in clients calling me saying, "Oh, Stacey, we sold a car a week ago, and a customer is trying to reject it under distance selling." But actually they came down to the dealership and they drove the vehicle around before we put the order through. And I'm saying, I get what you're saying, guys, but the options here is that it's a distance sale, or you were trading illegally, and those are your options. And customers are getting savvier, aren't they, James? They're getting savvier around the distance selling and their rights.
Absolutely.
So you just have to be so careful.
Yeah, I think the two words distance selling is become a thing that everybody knows about, and it's a term that's just sort of bandied about, isn't it? It's very much consumer power, isn't it? I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awareness is there, and you get sort of money saving expert guy sort of on this morning sort of telling everyone what they can and can't do, and just generally speaking, people are more aware of their rights, and that they can ultimately reject for any reason or no reason at all within 14 days of a distance sale delivery. And that's it, as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, we've been hearing of a few dealers bending the rules, but it's important to stress they are the small majority here. There's a small minority of dealers doing that. But one thing that I have been seeing quite a lot of is customers applying pressure on dealers. They may say, one of your competitor dealers has given me a test drive. Why aren't you offering that? And I think a lot of dealers should be praised for holding firm, standing firm, and saying, no, I'm not going to give you a test drive, even if it means losing a sale.
Absolutely. And I've had it as well, James, where clients have said to me, "But Stacey, if someone walks onto the forecourt and is physically looking round a car, what am I supposed to do?" And the answer to that is you have to ask them to leave. And I know it's not ideal, it goes against every grain of sort of customer service, bone in your body, but ultimately that is what the law is asking you to do. Is ask them to leave and to ring you, or get in touch online or on email.
Yeah. And it's also important to stress that even though we've been in this lockdown for a while now, and there is light at the end of the tunnel, we've got to stay firm and stand strong, and not sort of relax a little bit, because it's against the law fundamentally.
Well, it is, and trading standards are still active, aren't they? They're still out there, and I'm hearing of it. So what you wouldn't want to do is get this far and then all of a sudden be found to be in breach, be getting fines, it's plastered all over the news. It's just not ideal, is it, from a publicity perspective? Surely it's got to be better from a PR point of view to be following the rules, and actually from a health and safety and duty of care point of view towards your staff, your customers, actually want to do things right here. There is a risk, and we want to do things right.
Yeah, very good point indeed. Now, there's no doubt about it. I mean, the last 12 months have been hard for everybody. Have you been sort of seeing that as influenced issues that you're seeing? I mean, I'm thinking about customers here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, honestly, James, I've been doing this a long time, and if I tell you that the number of customer complaints and issues I'm dealing with has probably quadrupled, and issues which would normally go away quite quickly are just simply, not. And we're just seeing, issues, ridiculous issues really from customers that had maybe bought a vehicle 2 or 3 years ago, where they're now trying to reject it, or they're looking to make claims, under the FCA about, whether process was followed. They're threatening the ombudsman, they're threatening court action, and it's unbelievable, that what we're seeing in practice. And I'd like to say, it goes back to that point that that I mentioned at the beginning. I think it unfortunately is a sign of the times. And what I'd be doing if what I've been advising clients is, and I know a lot of businesses have done this, but review your terms and conditions, make sure they're strong, because they can help a lot of the time. And also a key factor is, let's educate the teams, because your team are the ones that are dealing with these customer issues in the first instance, and sometimes they can be nipped in the bud straight away. And also, if you educate your sales executive, your service advisors, then hopefully we can avoid some of the issues that we're finding ourselves in.
Yeah.
I'm also seeing, unfortunately, a rise in, obviously we've seen the back of PPI now, hopefully, but I'm also seeing in practice a rise in sort of claims handling firms, sort of going on these fishing expeditions where they're firing out letters to dealers saying, you know, you're in breach of this, you're in breach of that, when in fact they're not. It's just more of a, you know, they're just trying to sort of source an opportunity.
Right.
And we've obviously had the change in the commission disclosure rules, and I've seen attempts by claims firms to suggest that perhaps a deal that went through 2-3 years ago is in breach of the new rules that have only just come into force now. So you've just got to be careful. And again, my advice is just take some advice, take some legal advice. If you get one of those letters, don't just sort of knee-jerk reaction, just respond and you know, perhaps not go down the right route. I'd just take some advice.
Yeah, I mean, is it fair to say that what you're describing there all plays into the wider puzzle of, you know, dealers are having to learn and adapt to things like consumer, like distance selling, for example.
Yeah,
the amount of new paperwork and the amount of things that dealers have to think about to safeguard themselves from you know, potential problems further down the line.
yeah.
Is this part of a wider problem where dealers just need to be a lot more on their guard from now onwards?
I think so. And there's so much you can do, James, sort of preventative rather than reactive. So, you know, those points that I'm making about just maybe educating, you know, your teams about consumer law, about consumer rights, you know, reviewing your terms of business. And you know, we're seeing, you know, it's not just with customers that we're seeing issues. I mean, from an employment perspective, we're seeing a massive rise in employment tribunal claims. So they're 30% up at the moment, which is only going to increase. ACAS have come out and said that they're getting twice the number of calls than they normally would from disgruntled employees. And, you know, really not what would normally be a simple process with a member of staff is turning into something really convoluted. Because again, you know, employees perhaps are becoming more aware of their rights. Yeah. And, you know, and the pressure that everyone's under, I think at the moment, you know, is having an effect. So, you know, my advice is do things right. Mm-hmm. You know, if there's ever a time to follow process, is now. Yeah. Because I think, you know, you're just more at risk. You know, you're more at risk of claims and issues and disputes and grievances, unfortunately.
Well, let's just stick with that employment theme for a moment. Obviously, there are different kinds of employee grievances. And you can't generalize them at all. But has a lot of this come down to furlough and employers asking employees perhaps to be doing things which they feel uncomfortable about? I mean, how much of all of these grievances been influenced by the current circumstances that we're in?
Because obviously furlough has been a whole new sort of scheme to navigate for employers. So there are issues, you know, and we're dealing with a number of furlough test cases at the moment, you know, through the tribunal system, where employees are claiming either they should have been put on furlough when they weren't, and you know, various different issues. But I think it's because actually employers have been put in a situation where they're perhaps having to take more difficult decisions than they perhaps would in normal times, whether that be sort of redundancies or whether that be sort of moving people around in their teams, sort of changing job roles, sort of workplaces, working from home. So yeah, I think in the round, it does all link to COVID and it does link to furlough, but there is still that sense of just the general feeling of, you know, employees perhaps under pressure, you know, at home, at work, and that's just, you know, transpiring into grievances, to problems, and like I say, what would once be a really simple process or decision is turning into sort of some quite nasty litigation, unfortunately. Yeah,
and I mean, it's just difficult, isn't it? Because you know, you've got employees who have never been in this situation before, and you've got employers who are also not in this situation before.
Yeah.
And everybody's trying to do the right thing, but obviously there are grievances that crop up, and it's potentially taking an awful lot of time to actually deal with these kinds of cases. And I suppose, taking a theme from what you were saying earlier on, this isn't going to sort of go away overnight. No. Once lockdown ends and we try and get back to some sort of normality. These are sort of far-reaching problems.
They are, James, and I actually think it might even get a little bit worse, because what you might find is that as sort of lockdown lifts, the furlough scheme ends, you might find that resistance from some members of staff to come back to work. You've got members of staff who've perhaps been shielding for 12 months who are going to have reluctance and a bit of, concern about being back in the sort of open environment. And you've also, what I've seen is, what's been happening in practice is perhaps issues have been sort of like hidden by the furlough scheme. So you've got a problem with someone, so I'll just put him on furlough for now and we'll sort him out. But that doesn't last forever, does it? It's got to be tackled at some point. So I think we are going to see problems arising from that, in the next few months.
Yeah. Well, that's sad to hear, but I do agree with you, and it's going to be an interesting one to watch, really. Now, just finally, Stacey, I mean, dealers are potentially entering a bit of uncertain waters at the moment. We don't know when lockdown's going to lift. We don't know when the motor trade can go back to some kind of normality. What would be your top tips for dealers sort of looking ahead and planning? I mean, what are the things they should be thinking of?
I'd be thinking ahead to the end of the furlough scheme, definitely. Thinking about your planning for staffing, if you're going to be making any changes, if you want to perhaps be looking at restructuring or redundancies, you need to do that now. Generally speaking, from a sort of practical point of view, I think you need to be getting ready for lockdown to lift perhaps quite suddenly. I don't think we're going to get a huge amount of notice from Boris in terms of a time scale. So it's just making sure that your showrooms are ready, that everything's ready to go when we get the green light. Looking ahead, I think you need to be aware that there's some upcoming changes legally that might impact on you. So we've got the IR35 tax regime coming into play in April, which might impact on some dealers. We've got general sort of statutory changes coming into play in April. So you've got your increases to your minimum wage and everything like that. So it's just simply, I think, just looking ahead for the next few months and just planning as much as you can while you've got the time to.
Yeah, and I suppose the advice with all of this is, if there's any doubts, then just get some professional help and just talk it through with people, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Take some advice, even if it's just a phone call, James. The amount of time that someone just picks up the phone and we sort it out over a phone call, literally, sometimes it is just about getting a second opinion or bouncing someone off, one of the legal team. And it especially at the moment, it's a strong recommendation from me.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, we're going to have to leave it there today, Stacey, but thank you so much for coming on. Some fantastic top tips there. So, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, James. Thank you.
Well, that's it for today's Car Dealer Live, sponsored by CG Professional. Until next time, thanks very much for watching, and goodbye.